Welcome to Couch Quarterbacks.
Hey guys, welcome to the Couch Quarterbacks, one of the last episodes before the season starts. Not the last episode, but the penultimate, as they say, right?
Yeah, we'll have actually a busy week for y'all because we'll have 3 episodes coming out. We'll have the whole NFC split into 2 episodes, and then we'll have our week 1 prediction. So 3 episodes coming out this week. A busy week for us, Stein.
Yeah.
But once again, welcome to the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. I'm Andrew Rochefort. With me is Ben Steinberg, and we will be covering the NFC today, specifically the NFC East and the NFC North. And Stein, I don't know about you, but the NFC East, NFC Beast as we called it last season.
Yeah, it's definitely it's kind of like the NL East of football. You know, the NL East is just the teams keep beating up on each other, and a lot of the teams in the NL East are in the NFC East, if you think about it, like the cities. So we got a division that's kind of really, I would say there's a kind of a clear-cut contender, but you can make a case for probably 3 out of the 4 teams really to win this division.
Yeah, and without further ado, let's just hop right into the first team. And I think this is probably the team with the biggest variance in terms of how they could end up finishing. And that's the Dallas Cowboys. 6-10 last season, but you know, that record is kind of represented by the Dak Prescott injury where he missed the majority of the season last year, that compound fracture in his ankle.
Yeah, Dak, probably one of the most notable injuries of last year. Everyone saw the footage and just sad to see him go. And but the Cowboys are on Hard Knocks. We're on Hard Knocks this year.
I heard it was.
Team.
I heard it was not good.
It was pretty average. I watched 2 episodes, and there wasn't really anything special. I mean, there's only so much you can talk about Dak's injury, and there is concerns though about. We'll get into the health of Dak right now, of the fact that his leg, everything is good there, but right now everything's talking about is his shoulder.
Yeah, so he's been battling a shoulder injury, had a couple MRIs on that. They've rested him a little bit, but it looks like he's going to be good to go for the start of the season, but there is kind of some concerns that it could be a lingering injury throughout the season, definitely could aggravate it throughout the season. So even though the leg injury seems to be closer to 100%, the shoulder is now the issue for Dak. And I think, as you saw last season with the backup quarterbacks that they had with Gucci DiNucci, and Andy Dalton as their backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You saw with Dak out there, and maybe without Dak at 100%, that this team could finish under 500 again.
Yeah, I mean, second year of McCarthy, just a team that, a lot of us want to see fail just because no one can stand Cowboy fans, and us included.
America's team.
It's just kind of, it's all going to be on Dak, and we'll see how he works out with the shoulder thing, because this could be pretty debilitating, especially because the quarterback position requires you to throw the ball.
Well, and also a big concern, so the Cowboys will be playing on Thursday night, the first game of the season, against the defending Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they're going to be without at least one offensive lineman, if not 2, because Zach Martin ended up testing positive for COVID on Sunday, and because of the COVID rules in the NFL, even though he has a vaccination, he has to sit out for 5 days. So with it happening on Sunday, the game being on Thursday, he's not going to be out there.
Wow, the schedule's starting to screw people over already.
We mentioned it in the last episode how COVID will start to become a factor when we get into these episodes, and you're already seeing it now with the Cowboys.
Yeah, and it sucks that these guys are vaccinated. It just shows that Delta variant, and I don't know Martin's symptoms. He could be completely fine, but they want to protect obviously all the other members of their team. So
yeah, you got to, because he's vaccinated, he has to sit out 5 days and then have 2 negative tests in a 24-hour period. So like I said, with the game being on Thursday and him getting it Sunday, that
we hope
falls
this is
like
this is kind of like a once a week kind of thing, not like this will happen multiple times a week kind of deal, because the last season, remember, it seemed like every single week we were dealing with a new COVID outbreak for a different team, and teams were having to play. We had a Wednesday night game and a Tuesday night game.
Like every single day of the week, I think, last season. But
yeah, it was the weirdest time in football. But now we have fans in the stands, and especially Jerry's World will be full. Even though the game I think is in Tampa,
it's in Tampa
because they are the Super Bowl champs. Even though you think what's his name Jerry would be like, oh no, we need the first game of the season here.
Hey, he's just happy that they have a primetime game. So.
Exactly, and I'm sure that's probably one of 7 for the Cowboys. Let's talk about another primetime player, and Zeke Elliott. Had the dropsies last year.
Yeah, well, and he was probably the main guy that really was missing Dak out there last season. Of course, they had some offensive line injuries getting back into that, but Zeke only 979 yards on the ground last season. That was his lowest since that 6-game suspension season that he had a couple of years back.
He couldn't get, maybe 3 or 4 more carries to get him over that 1,000. It's 979 for an off season is still nothing to scoff at. So people are kind of expecting and hoping for a bounce back season, especially with the mental, I would say, like regression that he had with all the fumbles. A lot of fantasy owners can attest to that his fumbles, especially down the stretch, really kind of destroyed his value. So we're hoping for a bounce back season. Still have Tony Pollard back there. He's kind of morphed into that RB2 capable guy, for them, easy.
Yeah, some people are thinking that he could eat into some of Zeke's touches, which, I mean, it could end up benefiting him just because Zeke has had such large workloads over the past 4 or 5, really since he's been in the NFL and been a starter with the Cowboys. So Tony Pollard, definitely a nice running back too for this team. But when it comes down to it, the stars is really the receiving corps. They just have 3 studs as their top 3 on the depth chart when you talk about Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup.
Yeah, definitely a pretty awesome receiving corps for the Cowboys. Cooper's kind of been the best of the bunch, as he is probably the
he is the most experienced.
Yeah,
of the 3,
the most star power of the 3. CeeDee Lamb, definitely a really good rookie season last year.
A lot of people expecting him to have a really big season because he played well in those first 5 games when Dak was out there and kind of was still good, but definitely regressed just like the whole team when he was gone.
We could see him kind of take over that role for Cooper. And Cooper could become more of a possession, like an AJ Green type, doesn't have to do as much. With Lamb kind of being the bell cow receiver, and then Michael Gallup has just also been really good at that receiver 3 position, just kind of consistent for them.
Yeah, a guy that could be probably a wide receiver 2 on some other teams. Questionably, I mean, some of these bottom level teams a wide receiver 1, but because of the talent that he has in front of him, still a good wide receiver 3 for this offense.
Yeah, definitely great receivers all around. And then tight end, the experiment of what's his name did not work out. Who was that old tight end?
Jason Witten.
Bringing
Jason Witten back.
Yeah, that experiment didn't work out at all. And Blake Jarwin coming back after tearing his ACL last season. So hopefully it can get some production from the tight end position.
Yeah, probably won't be much, but like I said, with the 3 wide receivers, with Dak being back with Zeke, they really don't need much production out of their tight end position, so shouldn't be too much of a worry.
And then, Roach, you kind of touched on the offensive line, and everyone kind of knows the Cowboys as having a good offensive line over the past, 10 seasons, I would say. But this offensive line has kind of fallen off a little bit, losing Travis Frederick and stuff like that from years ago.
Yeah, that's what they finished 27th last season because of injuries. You mentioned Travis Frederick retiring after the 2019 season. Tyron Smith only played 2 games last season. Lael Collins didn't play at all last season. And then Zach Martin, we mentioned him earlier, just played in 10 games last season. So they're projected to finish 6th this season after finishing 27th last season just because they're supposed to get those guys back. But we already said about Martin not playing in the first game. Collins is dealing with a neck injury, so he's questionable for week 1. So they could, week 1 of the season, with that Bucs defense returning all 11 of their starters, already be in trouble in the first game.
Yeah, definitely in a hole. And then a awful defensive last year from the Cowboys. Second worst rush defense. They do draft Micah Parsons, who we both kind of was I wouldn't say a reach, but just kind of like a best available guy, because the guy they wanted to draft being what's his name from Alabama, the cornerback.
Oh yeah, that he went to the
Vikings.
No, he went to the Broncos.
Sorry,
anyway,
Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, Patrick Surtain. And they end up getting Micah Parsons, still a great defender for them. Definitely need to help out on this defense. They got a new guy calling out the defense this season with Dan Quinn. He's a new DC. Very familiar with him from the Falcons, but definitely looking for an upgrade on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
As the offense is going to be great, but it's all going to rely on their defense.
Yeah, DeMarcus Lawrence returning, definitely kind of the stalwart of that defense. Randy Gregory is still funny how he's still in the NFL.
Is he not suspended right now? Like I feel
that
like
guy
he's had multiple suspensions.
He just fell off so hard, but he's still listed. And then pretty much the heart and soul of this Cowboys defense is Leighton Vander Esch at linebacker. He's kind of become the leader, the new Sean Lee, pretty much.
He's been battling injuries the past couple seasons.
Yeah. They had Keanu Neal and DeMonte Casey from the Falcons as
follow it in Dan Quinn's footsteps.
Two safeties, but actually, as of now, they have Neal listed as a linebacker, which is very interesting. I know he's a hard hitter, but he's a guy we've seen struggle with injuries. So
yeah, I guess they just really need bodies out there. So it's like, hey, Keanu, if you want to play a little bit of linebacker, a little bit of safety. I think the Falcons kind of used him in some packages as more of a linebacker.
Yeah.
So it definitely interesting, but they could use really any sort of switch up to just kind of put a spark into that defense.
Yeah, and then kind of rounding it out, like we said, they drafted Parsons to be that outside linebacker, and then Trayvon Diggs is a decent corner, but not like a corner one or anything.
Going into their fantasy outlook, Dak is being drafted as the overall QB7, but there's definitely health concerns with drafting him. Like they said, the shoulder injury could linger on throughout the season. Of course, with the injury last season, he wasn't notable in fantasy, but he was the overall QB2 in 2019, so definitely has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah, with a healthy season and
the weapons around him as well.
Exactly. Zeke drafted as a running back 6, finished 9th in 2020. I mean, that's going to come from his lack of yardage and his fumbles, definitely putting him down. He's been a top 5 running back pretty much since he's been in the league.
Yeah,
besides his suspension season.
Yeah, 3 of the past 5 seasons, so definitely a lot of people expecting him to return to form. I think that he's going to have a bounce-back season as long as Dak stays out there, which we're probably going to say with a lot of these guys in terms of fantasy.
Yeah.
And then in terms of Tony Pollard, definitely grab him later on in the rounds, especially if you're drafting Zeke, because he's probably one of the top handcuffs in the league. And if Zeke goes down, then he'll end up being close to a running back 2, or if not a running back 1.
Yeah. And then pretty much with the Amari Cooper CeeDee Lamb combo, wide receiver 14 and 15 respectively, so literally pick one or the other.
Yeah, they're getting drafted back-to-back. Lamb is definitely going to have the more upside. Like I said, a lot of people are expecting him to have a really big season. I think Amari is more of the safer pick, getting, like you said, more action, kind of closer, and get some more PPR points, whereas Lamb is definitely going to be the upside play, the more boom-bust type guy.
Yeah, and then Gallup is just something you can keep on your bench. Might be available if any of those guys go down. It just depending on how all cylinders are firing in Dallas. And then in terms of tight ends, defense, just nothing really emerges
there's
great.
No need to get Jarwin, no need to get Dalton Schultz. The defense, like I said, unless there's some big leap from last season, then I don't think that they're going to be anything special. You could make an argument for them being a streamer just if they're facing like the Eagles or the Giants.
Yeah, or the football team. It seems like,
if they're facing the division.
Yeah, or they're playing on Thanksgiving, against the Lions or something.
Yeah, so you might be able to pick them up, but other than that, just stay away from that defense.
Yeah, and then moving on to what I would say the team with probably the worst case for winning this division.
I agree.
And that's going to be the Eagles, who finished at 4-11-1 last season. That's just an ugly record to look at, Roach.
Yeah, just having the losing record by that much, and then also having the tie in there too.
Yeah.
But the Eagles, really since they won the Super Bowl, have been kind of on that downward slope.
We've seen them. They're still in cap hell and just
Have
losing
veterans.
guys. Yeah, losing guys and just things. The receiver, and we'll get into that, has been literally a revolving door. So we'll get into the kind of the management side of it real quick, as Doug Peterson was kind of let go, I would say, fired last year.
Well, they always say it's like they mutually parted ways.
Yeah, it was a kind of a weird, goodbye, because you thought he earned clout with the Super Bowl win for a team that never won a Super Bowl, but that just shows you how quick that Philly wanted to get rid of,
Philly fans are so understanding.
Yeah, how far they've fallen. Nick Sirianni, Sirianni, is Italian. The Italian stallion now in as head coach. Pretty much just complete turnaround everywhere, and that's going to start with the quarterback too. Carson Wentz to the Colts. Jalen Hurts steps up as the official starter as of now.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts did start a couple of games down the stretch last season. Record-wise wasn't good, only 1-3 in those games. Really throwing the football wasn't too good either, just around 50% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but he really does his damage on the ground, having 63 carries, 354 yards, 3 touchdowns. So definitely proves something on at least with his legs.
If you look at it, 1-3 with those kind of numbers, pretty much sounds like a preseason career for a guy. So Hurts' preseason is over. He had his preseason last year. Now it's time that because there was also a lot of doubts last year with Carson Wentz. And a lot of stuff going around, a lot of moving parts. So this will be nice that Hurts finally has his time to shine, and depending on how his season goes, will be the kind of the litmus test on if he's a guy who's going to be a viable guy or going to be a guy who's going to just bounce around like Tyrod Taylor or something like that.
Between Hurts and Tua, I think those are two young quarterbacks that really have the most to prove, especially being the second year guys.
That is true. Yeah, guys that are really looking to step up after first seasons. They do trade for Gardner Minshew. We did see that.
In Philly.
As what Trevor Lawrence was named the starter in Jacksonville. So Minshew is going to Philly to bring his swagger up there, and maybe that could make Hurts play better, as Minshew, I think, is a capable backup. I don't think he's going to win you a lot of games, but he's a guy who can at least be a game manager.
I would say he's a guy that's a great backup. Not a great starter, but great as a backup. Just someone that's got that experience starting.
Yeah.
But it is supposed to be Jalen Hurts' time to shine this year with Philly.
And then running back, which they thought they had the long-term solution in Miles Sanders, but really wasn't super impressive since his debut. Everyone thought Miles Sanders was kind of the next coming to Saquon, same pedigree, same school, same running style, but he's been serviceable,
Yeah, pretty much 850 yards on the ground. The big question mark is going to be catching the football. 52 targets last season and only 28 receptions. You saw in his rookie season he was pretty good as a receiver, but
just a hair under 200 yards, 0 touchdowns. And they kind of had trying different guys out last year at running back.
And they've been kind of non-committal with him in training camp, saying that they're just going to not really have a running back by committee, but I guess feature a couple different running backs. They have Boston Scott. They really like Kenny Gainwell, who they drafted in the middle rounds this past season.
Gainwell's just a great running back name. He's going to gain yards,
I didn't even think about that, but it is a great running back name.
And reports have been saying that he has carved a pretty good position for himself coming out of training camp.
Miles Sanders is definitely going to be the running back one, but in terms of his ceiling, if you're looking fantasy-wise, it may be kind of capped a little bit just because of those other two running backs, and both of them being mainly receiving running backs.
So we go from one shaky position for the Eagles to a very shaky position, a group for the Eagles, and that is the receiving core.
And it's been the same way for years. What they had a couple seasons, I think last season and maybe even the season before that, where they had guys that weren't even.
No, that was last season. They had the guys who weren't even listed as wide receivers.
Well, and then they didn't have any wide receiver with 500 receiving yards overall. So the receiving core has been very bad for a number of years. They do draft Devontae Smith in the first round, hoping that he'll be the wide receiver one for them. He has that connection when Jalen Hurts was at Alabama.
Yes,
so hopefully
Georgia fans
that chemistry
can attest to that one.
Hopefully that chemistry will be there.
Yeah, they hope Jalen Reagor can develop after last year. Played only 11 games. Caught 31 passes for 396 yards and a TD. So really very, very small sample size from him for a receiver. Greg Ward, the old quarterback, kind of gave tight end numbers for a receiver.
Yeah, he is playing out of the slot. Did have 6 touchdowns last season, kind of playing just out of necessity because they really needed anyone they could get at the wide receiver position, and just showing how badly they need wide receivers. They released Travis Fulgham at the end of training camp, and he led the team in receiving yards last season with 539. So I think it was 2019 where they didn't have a wide receiver over 500 yards receiving, but definitely still a very shaky wide receiver core. Don't expect much, really, maybe outside of Devontae Smith, and if Jalen Reagor can have a better second season than his rookie year.
It seems like certain teams get stuck with certain position groups that just are revolving doors, whether that be Cleveland with quarterbacks before Baker, and then it seems like the Eagles with receivers lately have turned into that, and we talked about the Ravens have been that too. So
that's what you've seen them miss the mark with, just their early wide receiver selections. Nelson Aguilar, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is still on the team, but he's like a wide receiver 4 or 5.
You bring back Deshaun Watson. I mean, not Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Jackson. Very different Deshaun's. And you had the deep threat. Who was the deep threat for all those years?
Deshaun Jackson was a deep threat.
No. The guy they had last year. I will have to look it up. Sorry.
But moving on to their tight end tandem, which is really the better part of their receiving core, and that's Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Zach Ertz at age 30, 11 games last season, battling some injuries, and now had his career lows in terms of stats. 36 receptions, 335 yards, just 1 touchdown, and he's been durable over his career. This is the first time that he didn't play at least 14 games, so maybe starting to see age kind of creep up on him.
Goddard kind of picked up the slack a little bit with 46 receptions for over 500 yards and 3 TDs. So a pretty good tandem. I mean, we're definitely seeing Zach Ertz get up there in age, and a lot of people, especially in fantasy, are kind of, I would say, dropping him, and he's kind of dropped. He's not that top-tier tight end that he once was. And maybe we could see Goddard kind of take over that role for Ertz. But
yeah, I think they'll probably, just because of how weak the receivers are, they'll probably just end up running some 2 tight end sets, and I think both of them could end up having nice seasons. Definitely Goddard probably having a better one than Ertz, but both could have some a nice season this year.
I'm predicting a better year for Ertz, but I think we're going to see similar numbers. They're not going to jump off the page with the numbers, that because he's 30 years old, and it's kind of getting to that point.
I will say Hurts has apparently been peppering the tight ends in training camp, so how much you want to believe of that is up to you, but there's reports from training camp saying that they've been having a good camp. So
let's talk about that offensive line that's always been a strong suit for the Eagles. With Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce, 2 guys have that just been stalwarts on the offensive line.
Yeah, a couple of aging guys, Kelce at 33, Lane Johnson at 31. So we were talking about just some of the money that the Eagles are tied up to with some aging veterans. Both of those guys definitely come to mind. They had 2 of their starting offensive linemen miss all of last season, with Andre Dillard, one of the young guys they drafted a year or 2 ago.
Yeah, at Boston College, I'm pretty sure.
And Brandon Brooks as well. Dillard is actually week to week right now with a knee injury, so he's questionable for week 1. But they did shore up at least a little bit of depth with drafting Landon Dickerson out of Alabama, which should help out their offensive line.
Even though Dickerson played more of a center, and they already have a guy up there with Kelce at the center position. You could think Dickerson could switch over to a guard, or even
when he was at Florida State, he did play some guard, so definitely could move around on the offensive line just wherever they need him. But they are projected 13th.
I would say just an average offensive line, middle of the pack, and then defense. This team really doesn't have a lot of names on defense at this point. They still have Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, but both of those guys are getting up there.
Yeah,
Big game Slay at cornerback.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a bad defense. We talk about the Cowboys, how bad their defense is. The Eagles just as bad, if not worse. So I'm not expecting too much from them this season. But the big difference between the Cowboys and the Eagles is that the Cowboys at least have a top 5 offense, whereas the Eagles are probably in the bottom half of the league.
Yeah, I mean, most of the only names on their defense are aged guys like Darius Slay. Is just almost aged out in the NFL. So really just expect that defense to just not be anything special. Let's talk about fantasy. Jalen Hurts actually getting drafted out of QB 14. A lot of people are saying he has top 12 QB upside. So he could be a guy you could get at the end. Maybe you have to stream a quarterback. He could be available.
Yeah, he's definitely someone where if you go for like other positions early, kind of always wait on your quarterback, he's definitely going to be an option for you. Like I said, there is that boom bust kind of potential just because he doesn't have a whole lot of weapons around him. But one of the big upsides for him fantasy wise is that he has the numbers just running with his legs. So
yeah, personally, I would stay away from him just because I think the numbers were so poor last year, and there's probably better quarterbacks. But if you're really in desperate need of a streamer, I think Hurts, you could do worse than Hurts.
Yeah.
Miles Sanders drafted as running back 19. He's kind of you're probably going to get him at the end of the third, start of the fourth round.
Yeah, and he's been falling compared to last season. I mean, he was getting drafted right around that like 1-2 turn.
Running back 2, easy running back 2, maybe even a flex.
Yeah. He was the running back 23 last season, 15 in 2019 his rookie season. I'm not too high on Miles Sanders. If he's ever on the board when I'm drafting, I usually stay away from him just because I'm kind of worried just about this Eagles offense in general. Yeah. So just someone that I'm not really targeting overall in fantasy. But
yeah, especially in a PPR too, with the bad receiving year he had last year.
Yeah, and then having 2 receiving backs behind him, he might not be out there much on third down.
Yeah, and then you kind of got interesting guys with Gainwell. Gainwell's kind of a question mark because Gainwell could emerge as a guy who could be a lot of upside, I personally think.
I mean, if Miles Sanders gets hurt, Gainwell, I think, would get the first and second down carries compared to Boston Scott.
Yeah.
I really think Gainwell, Scott, and Rager really just like last spot on your bench if you want to draft them, if they get drafted.
Those are project picks, guys that you could maybe... Gainwell might be better stashed than Rager and Scott, but just guys that you would probably just pick up off the waivers potentially. Devontae Smith is getting probably the most upside of any of these guys just because we saw him win the Heisman. I mean, this guy could really emerge as finally a something that sticks for a receiver in Philly. Kind of fifth ADP, end of the fifth round, but I would say he's definitely wide receiver 3.
Yeah, he's got some upside. I wouldn't take him as early as the 5th round, but he, like I said, just because he's really the only notable wide receiver on this team, he's going to get targets, so definitely worth a look if you have him at the right spot. And then Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz. Goddard's getting drafted as a tight end 8 in round 6. Zach Ertz as the tight end 18 all the way back in round 13. I usually pass on Goddard just because Ertz is available in the 13th round, and I think he could put up similar, if not, maybe slightly worse numbers. Yeah. You got to remember with Ertz, this is a guy that was a tight end 6 or better from 2016 to 2019. He was a tight end 31 last season. We mentioned the injuries with him, but I think this is a guy that if you're grabbing a second tight end, I pretty much am always looking for him as a backup tight end as the last spot on my bench in fantasy drafts.
Could be a good flex. I mean, a good stream for a buy. He could also have one of those kind of last gasp kind of efforts after such a bad year. He's not going to have anywhere near the production he once had. That's just because of age and with the position he plays. But he could have, one last gasp, and you could get him. You could get lucky one of those weeks when he has like 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Play him in the right week.
Exactly.
And then the Eagles' defense, we've just mentioned how bad they were.
Stay away.
If you want him against one of those other NFC East teams, be my guess. But otherwise, just stay away from them.
It's definitely a check the matchup deal, but more often than less, just don't. Let's talk about the next team, which I personally think has the best case to win the NFC Beast, and that is the Washington Football Team. In the playoffs last year at 7-9, winning the division, where a 10-win team in the AFC doesn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, we mentioned just how bad the NFC East was last season, so 7-9 was the cream of the crop. They end up losing in the wild card round to Tampa, putting up a great fight, 31-23. Of course, everyone remembers Taylor Heineke, how he had the game of his life in that playoff start. But they do have a new quarterback at the helm. No more Dwayne Haskins, no more Alex Smith, as they sign Ryan Fitzpatrick to a 1-year deal. He's going to be the starting quarterback week 1 for this Washington Football Team.
Yeah, it seems like he's been on every single NFC East and AFC East team.
He's been you could just limit it to like every single team in general.
Honestly, but it's all said and done, he's going to have a jersey from almost every team, and 38 years old, obviously the Harvard guy. I mean, that's everything that is talked about him. But he's just a guy who every time he comes in is either on or he's off.
I mean, I think this is a perfect fit for the Washington football team. We mentioned they were a playoff team last season. They have an elite defense. They were the third fewest in terms of yards per game last season, so definitely a huge boost at the quarterback position. You had Alex Smith, I mean, great story and everything like that. I'm sure everyone knows about it by now.
Yeah.
Being able to come back and actually play and start for a team once again after that horrific leg injury. He was 5-1 with them, but honestly, more of a game manager, especially at this point in his career.
Yeah, and that offense too.
Yeah, I was gonna say lots of checkdowns. Dwayne Haskins, of course, was 1-5. And then
complete head case.
Yeah, and then Kyle Allen was 1-3 with them last season. He is actually still with the team as the third string quarterback.
Yeah,
but,
and that's just our favorite, Ron Rivera.
Yeah, but I think just the upgrade at the quarterback position, even Ryan Fitzpatrick at 38 years old is still got some something left on the table. Yeah, exactly. 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions with the Dolphins last season. It seems like he was always coming in when Tua would have a bad game and then lead them to a comeback. That Raiders game comes to mind where he had that amazing throw down the sideline where he gets his head ripped off.
Everyone's seen that play, and Fitz is going to be a capable guy for them. And finally, I think this offense is going to have a little more firepower. I don't think Fitz is going to be the reason why. I think it's going to be the playmakers around him, as we actually have some playmakers finally emerging from the Washington football team. And that's going to start with Antonio Booby Gibson. 14 games last year, rushing for 170 carries for 795 yards with 11 TDs. 11 TDs immediately jumps off the page.
Yeah, I mean, 11 touchdowns and 170 carries. That's absolutely crazy production. Not amazing in the passing game, just 36 receptions.
Yeah.
But a lot of reports are saying that they want him more as a 3-down back, trying to use him in some 2-minute situations on third downs. They, of course, have J.D. McKissick, who is perfect for that role. He had 80 receptions last season. He's back with the team. So I think that Antonio Gibson, look for him to have a big year this upcoming season. Just already had a great rookie season, and look for some even better production in year 2.
Yeah, definitely a good. It's nice to see them have a great bell cow running back and a guy who's going to really even be attractive to fantasy players.
In terms of running backs, he might have like the biggest. I guess if you're looking fantasy wise, a guy that's being drafted outside of the top 5 running backs that could be a top 5 running back.
Yeah, definitely. And then receiving side of the ball, pretty much it's going to be Terry McLaurin again, and we saw him kind of emerge, which is nice from a team that hasn't had anyone.
I was going to say, he had 1,100 yards and only 4 touchdowns last season with that hodgepodge of quarterbacks that we mentioned earlier. Yeah. Just imagine him with a gunslinger like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, the 87 receptions, 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns. Those touchdown numbers are definitely going to go up this upcoming season with Fitzpatrick. And McLaurin's had a nice career so far. Expect him to do big things again this season as their wide receiver 1.
And then kind of almost a legit wide receiver 2 in Curtis Samuel. I'm a little reluctant to give him that definitive wide receiver 2 because I think on any other team he'd be with 3, but
he was a 3 with the Panthers last season. You saw him have a really nice second half of the season. I know you had him in Fantasy Stein. He ended up winning you a couple of weeks, but he ends up going he ends up going to the Washington football team. And like you said, going to be the wide receiver 2 for them. And a lot of people think that he's going to have a nice season and benefit from Ryan Fitzpatrick as well. He has been dealing with a groin injury right now, but
Rivera is questionable for week 1.
Rivera's confident that he'll end up playing week 1. He has been practicing over the past couple days, so expect him to be out there and hopefully be at 100% to play the majority of the snaps.
And then a thing I really like is Adam Humphries in the slot for them. So they do have Adam Humphries available slot, and Logan Thomas too.
Yeah, Logan Thomas had a career year last season. His age 29 season, 72 receptions, 670 yards, 6 touchdowns. Of course, everyone knows he was a college quarterback at Virginia Tech. His previous highs was back with the Lions in 2019, only 16 receptions, 173 yards, 1 touchdown. So, in his 6th or 7th season of his career, he finally has that breakout year. Not really sure what to expect from him. I would think it'd be similar numbers at least with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, but you're always kind of worried with those tight ends that have those just breakout seasons out of nowhere, what they're going to do after that.
It's weird because Ertz and Thomas, we just talked about Ertz and Thomas are the exact same age. but it seems like Ertz's trajectory is going down, whereas Thomas's is going up.
Yeah,
so
it honestly really is, which is crazy to think about Stein.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't long term, be invested in Logan Thomas, but it'd be a good for this season to see him do well.
Well, and also think about it from a much lesser extent, obviously, but Darren Waller, how he kind of just busted onto the scene in his late 20s, and how he's now an elite tight end in the leagues. Like I said, Logan Thomas definitely not on that level, but in such a thin position from a fantasy perspective, it's definitely interesting to see if he'll be able to repeat as a top, closer to a topper tier tight end.
Yeah. Offensive line is kind of similar to the Eagles, just average. 17th best offensive line on Pro Football Focus. Had a good season last year. They do add Charles Leno and Sam Cosmi. Brandon Sharif is probably their best offensive lineman, I would say.
They franchise tagged him, made sure he was going to come back at least one more season, so he's back with the team. But like you said, they're projected to finish 17th, definitely a middle-of-the-pack offensive line.
Yeah, and Falcons fans, they do have Wes Schweitzer on that offensive line. Also, if some of y'all remember Eric Flowers is backup for
I feel like that guy's bounced around just about everywhere.
Backup.
Huge bust for the Giants.
We talked a lot about the Washington offense, but we got to talk about that defense, Roach, real quickly. Their front seven is ridiculous. Let me just read off their defensive line.
Yeah, going ahead.
Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat. Okay, that's their defensive line. That is a monster
stud on.
Of a defensive line. And you got Jemin Davis at linebacker, John Bostic, Cole Holcomb, pretty good linebackers. Kendall Fuller, Landon Collins, and Bobby McCain at the secondary.
I mean, just with you naming off those names, Stein, you understand why they finished the second fewest yards per game allowed, fourth fewest points per game. They had the second most sacks last season with that front seven, especially. Yeah. I mean, that was a big reason why they won the division, because we mentioned how bad their offense was. Having Alex Smith out there down the stretch when he was just pretty much game managing and making sure they got enough points for the defense just to stay out there and not give them up. So this is definitely going to be a team that they're going to be a top defense once again this season, but now that they have an improved offense, I think you could expect some big things.
Yeah, they could have a winning record this year and win the division. And it's just their defense, I can't say it enough, is going to be amazing. That front four is going to get you 3 to 4 sacks a game, I think, at minimum. That's just how it's going to go.
They'll definitely be up there with the Rams as one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the league this season.
Yeah. Ryan, okay, let's talk about fantasy outlook. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think it's the same story it's been over the past years. Streamer at best.
Yeah, don't draft him as your starting quarterback. Look at him for super flex if you got the 2 QB league. Yeah. But definitely going to be a streamer against some of these weaker teams. You can definitely throw him out there.
A mean pick too, if you're thinking that. Antonio Gibson, drafted as running back 13. Definitely a good running back too.
Yeah, that's what I'm always looking for him at the end of the second round if he's able to drop to me. Like if you have that second or third pick, when you come back around, get Antonio Gibson. Like I said, he's probably being drafted outside of the top 10. He has that top 5 upside.
Could be a good secret because a lot of people, including me, are very, very touch and go on any Washington football offensive player. So, if a lot of people are being as reluctant as I am with these offensive players, he could fall to you at a good draft position. J.D. McKissick could also be a good surprise.
He was the running back 17 last season.
Yeah.
I mean, PPR-wise, of course, like I said, the 80 receptions for him, but definitely a good bench guy where if he's going to be out there on third down, he doesn't have the check down guys that he had before. Yeah. But even with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, I still think he could still have a decent week if you need him on a bye or something like that.
Yeah. Followed by Terry McLaurin at receiver 10. Definitely going to get a big boost with Ryan Fitzpatrick compared to his revolving door of quarterbacks last year. Drafted around the third round, which I think is just about right.
Yeah, he was a wide receiver 20 last season. I like him just on that fringe top 10 guy, maybe definitely like a top 12 or top 15 receiver, and you can't complain if you got him on your team.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel also could be a nice bench piece.
A lot of people are hyping him up with where he's getting drafted in the 9th round.
I think 9 might be a little early. I think his best position is a flex. And I think that's because he can do a little bit more too on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, he's definitely going to get drafted out as a bench guy, but could possibly, if you have an injury or something like that, hop into your flex position. So probably the biggest question is just being on one, a new team, even though he's used to Ron Rivera's system with Carolina, and then two, just having a new quarterback and not being healthy in camp, so not getting those reps with Fitzpatrick. Yeah.
Logan Thomas drafted as a tight end 12. Definitely, I would take a look at Logan Thomas. He's a guy I think you would want to have if you don't get Kelsey or Waller.
He was the tight end 4 last season. I know there was an injury to Kittle last season, so that definitely he wasn't up there in the top 5. But being drafted as a tight end 12, I mean that's crazy value.
Good. Yeah, that's great value.
If you're the last guy drafted in a tight end and you end up getting Logan Thomas, you definitely take that as a win.
Yeah, that's still a good position for him. And then Washington defense might be the first or second defense off the board.
Yeah, pretty much them and the Rams going to be the 2 best. They were the 6th best fantasy defense last season, but you're definitely going to be drafting them.
Yeah. Sacks, you're going to get some sacks, you're going to get some forced fumbles, and you're going to get some lower scoring games, I feel, as with this Washington defense. Definitely a target. They could get you 20 points. I honestly think.
Yeah, especially against some like the Eagles' offense.
The Eagles, any of these NFC East offenses, you could feast on. If only they played themselves on. I'm just kidding. But let's move on to another. It seems super similar case to all these teams, and that is the Giants, 6-10 last year, and they just have one of the most milquetoast quarterbacks. I love that word, milquetoast. Because it sounds like
I don't even know what it means, but
it's just like lukewarm.
Yeah, one of the most mediocre quarterbacks in Daniel Jones, and I think this is going to be a big make or break year for him. He's got his 5th-year option decision looming in the offseason, and he's got names at least around him.
Is that a team option or a player option?
It's a team option.
Okay, so he's playing for his job. He's not playing for himself.
Yeah, with all these first-round rookie quarterbacks, they always get that 5th-year team option, whether or not the team wants to exercise it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very average. He's not doing anything to put him on the low light reels, except for that one, famous trip from
his long touchdown run that he ends up getting eaten by the turf monster.
Yeah, that everyone was watching, but he just hasn't done anything to light up the scoreboards either. And the offense, second fewest in yards per game last season and points per game. So
you can equate some of that to Saquon not being out there, but also
true.
He still had some decent receivers out there. So you just need better production from Daniel Jones at quarterback.
5 with a 5.9 record, 63% completion percentage, a hair under 3,000 yards, with literally a touchdown to interception ratio being almost 1-for-1 with 11 and 10, and a 61 QBR.
The big thing that's concerning for me is he was sacked 45 times last season, so he's got a bad offensive line, and then he's had 29 fumbles in 2 seasons. He led the league both of those years. He had 18 in his rookie season, 11 last season. So it's just a matter of, with the 10 interceptions, all the fumbles, he just can't take care of the football.
He is more mobile than we think. He did have 400 rushing yards last season, and I think his fumbles are going to come from him rushing. You played Madden before, where you're rushing with a quarterback. They tend to fumble a little bit more. But definitely the sack numbers are very eye-opening, and you hope that they address that offensive line, which we'll get into.
I would say when we get into it, there's not much of an improvement from the offensive line going into this season. But
somebody that's going to benefit, I would say benefit mightily from that, hopefully, could be Saquon, coming back from just a terrible injury last year.
Yeah, so he ends up tearing his Achilles in week 2 last season. Everyone knows Saquon in his first 2 years, just absolutely a dynamite running back. He's close to being fully cleared, according to Ian Rappaport. A lot of people are expecting him to be out there week 1. Whether or not he gets a full volume of carries remains to be seen. I think a lot of people expect him to be at least on a snap count.
Yeah.
When he's out there week 1, and if he's out there week 1. But I think overall Saquon will be, if he gets back to full health, will be just going back to one of those top 5 running backs that he was in his first 2 years.
Yeah, hopefully he'll be unaffected and just be able to churn and burn like he does. They do sign Devontae Booker as a backup. Had a pretty decent season last year with the Raiders. with almost with over 400 yards rushing. They also did make another move with the receivers, signing Kenny Golladay, which is probably their biggest. Yeah, easily their biggest pickup.
Yeah, he was one of the biggest wide receivers on the market this offseason. They gave him a 4-year deal, $72 million. Only played in 5 games last season, though, with the Lions. But he did have some good years with Detroit. He's been having some injuries in training camp now, too, so durability is definitely a question with him. He's been out the past 3 weeks with a hamstring injury. He's started to practice again, but just minimal work with Daniel Jones, so it's kind of questionable in terms of their chemistry once again, week 1 and early on in the season, how it's going to be.
Yeah. Still have Sterling Shepard, though.
Just a serviceable receiver.
Yeah, serviceable receiver with a decent season last year. Darius Slayton had actually a decent amount of receiving yards, but the touchdowns weren't there.
Yeah, he's more known as a deep threat for this team, and as a wide receiver 3, definitely going to be a deep threat for them.
Yeah, they do draft Kadarius Toney out of Florida in the first round, which was kind of an interesting. They're hoping to upgrade, on their offense with their bad numbers last year.
He'll be kind of a gadget player for them. He's been dealing with injury, which has kind of been the main theme for the Giants in camp. He was in pads earlier on in this week, so hopefully he'll be out there week 1, but once again, just not getting a lot of reps with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, and then tight end Evan Ingram, who, was supposed to take another step, but just the yards were there, but the touchdowns were definitely not.
Yeah, he was great a couple years back, and he just hasn't really gotten back to that potential that a lot of people were thinking from him, and now it's looking like he's not even going to end up being out there week 1. He's been dealing with a calf injury. So they ended up getting Kyle Rudolph in the offseason. He spent his whole career with the Vikings. They signed Ryan Izzo on Wednesday, the former Seminole. So that's kind of a bad sign for Ingram being out there on week 1.
Yeah. Also add Kyle Rudolph from the Vikings, who was kind of been injured too and just had a very disappointing season last year. So it's kind of like Ingram's job to really, try to... It's his job to lose, I should say.
Yeah, I don't expect a whole lot from their tight ends, especially since they've got 2 or 3 guys out there. So if you're going to get any sort of production, it's probably going to be from the wide receivers. But it really all depends on how Daniel Jones is. He like I said, he's got the names around him. It's whether or not what he can do with those names.
Yeah, and then in terms of offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines we've seen. Just kind of been a turnstile for defensive tackles and defensive ends. When the Washington football team plays the Giants offensive line, that is going to be the start of the week, my friend.
Yeah, they've been bad for the past couple seasons now. Nate Solder is returning. He was opted out of 2020 with COVID concerns.
Yeah.
They've got a couple guys with experience, but they just haven't been good in the years that they've gotten the reps out there.
Yeah, Will Hernandez and Andrew Thomas.
Andrew Thomas. I'm sure if you watched the preseason, you heard about how bad he was in their final preseason game.
Yeah, and you're hoping that because these guys are all our names, but they just gotta play like the names that they are. And then defense, just kind of below average.
Yeah, nothing really special about the defense, and they're not going to be that good of a team.
Yeah, Adoree Jackson from last year, Jabril Peppers, people still love him even though he's never done anything super great. And then you have what's his name coming back. Nope, sorry, I was thinking of someone else.
But yeah, it's not going to be that good of a defense. So looking at the fantasy outlook, Daniel Jones, super flex only in those kind of leagues. I honestly wouldn't even look at him really as a streamer. I'm not. As someone that owns Daniel Jones in a dynasty league, I'm not very confident in what he's going to do this season.
Yeah, Rich, keep him on your bench.
I was going to say, luckily I have some other quarterbacks. I'm
surprised you haven't even
started.
You might have to drop him soon.
No, this is a super flex league, so I got to at least hang on to him.
Yeah, super flex. Saquon, drafted as running back 5, pretty much is going to be anywhere in the first round.
Yeah, it just really depends. Some people are worried about the injury.
It's not like last year where it was him and McCaffrey for 1 and 2, just because the injuries brought him down just a little bit.
Yeah, in his 2 healthy seasons, he was the running back 10 in 2019, the overall running back 1 in 2018. So, like I said, it really just depends on his health. If he's out there and healthy, I think he'll return back to a top 5 running back. If he ends up kind of having a snap count and missing some time this season, then it could be a bust pick in the first round.
Yeah, Kenny Golladay actually, drafted around round 5. I like him as a wide receiver too, but the durability concerns, especially coming off of his low play from last year.
Yeah, in redrafts, I'm definitely concerned with him and kind of jump over him in any time he comes up or in those middle rounds just as like a flex option or a wide receiver too.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm just worried about his health, worried about this Giants offense in general.
Yeah. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton kind of worthy of a flyer spot if Golladay is going to be out with his injuries concerns. So those are guys you could like maybe pencil in. I would say Shepard might be the better bet than Slayton. Slayton a little more boom or bust.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Ingram, I think, still has potential.
Yeah, I mean, he's going in the 12th round, so kind of going back to Zach Ertz around like that territory.
Yeah, tight end 2, maybe. I would say tight end 2 if if you need another tight end.
If I had him as a tight end 1, I'd be very concerned. So
yeah, I wouldn't have him. There's probably a ton better flex options, but if you're really in a pinch with tight ends, then you could do worse.
Yeah.
And then Giants defense, just
stream at best just because of the division that they're in. You're playing the Eagles twice. You're playing well, I wouldn't start them against the Cowboys or a Washington football team. So you're playing the Eagles twice. So
yeah, exactly.
Those are the 2 weeks to look at them.
All right, moving on to the NFC North, a division that's a lot more cut and dry. I could say that pretty much it's for second and third with this division, whereas 1 and 4 have already been pretty much decided ahead of time. And let's start with one of the teams competing for that second or third spot with the Bears. Finished 500 last year, losing to the Saints in that Nickelodeon game at the Superdome, with Mitch Trubisky getting the MVP, but also getting the boot out of Chicago.
Yeah, his last shining glory is getting that MVP, and now he is.
Notice how he said N, not MVP.
Yeah.
He got Nick's value. I don't even know
Nickelodeon valuable player.
Speaking of, they are going to be doing the Nickelodeon game again.
I saw that. I'm happy to see that.
Yes, so we will be seeing the Slime Zone. It was very.
It was
ridiculous.
I was gonna say it was a very fun game to watch though on there, especially because it was like kind of a blowout too.
Yeah,
21-9. Like the Bears were really never really in that game.
The cartoon eyes and the hamburgers on players. It was weird, but you replace one mediocre quarterback with another mediocre quarterback, and that's Andy Dalton coming over from the Cowboys. Has been called quarterback 1.
Yeah, so when they signed him back in, it was probably March before the NFL draft, they promised him the starting quarterback job, and then they ended up trading up and getting Justin Fields.
Justin Fields kind of falls, right where they wanted him, even though they do trade up for him. It's kind of like, because a lot of people thought Fields might have gone, top.
They thought he was going to go
8,
third overall to the 49ers, but he ends up dropping into the teens, so the Bears trade up, get him, but because they promised Andy Dalton the starting quarterback spot, it's looking like Andy Dalton is going to be QB1 at least for week 1.
This is like you have two cars in your garage. You have you have an old Ford and you have this new Ferrari, but you have to drive the Ford to go get the gas for the Ferrari. That's pretty much what it is, and that's a weird analogy, but that's literally how it is, because Justin Fields is the hot, young ticket item that they want to show out, but they promised, they're like, oh, we have to give our guy, we paying him all this money. So
yeah, I don't expect Andy Dalton to start for any more than the first couple weeks of the season at most.
They're going to be clamoring in Chicago for Justin Fields.
Especially because I'm pretty sure they're playing the 49ers week 1. I'll have to look at it.
Yeah.
But
while you're checking that, though, Dalton is serviceable as a backup. He did throw more touchdowns than picks last year, but still only had a 53.8 QBR. So he's definitely serviceable if Justin Fields goes down. I like how you say if Justin Fields goes down, because it's like we know Fields is going to be the starter eventually.
Oh, it's even worse. They play the Rams week 1.
Oh, goodness.
So that's what Sean McVay said, that he was going to prepare to that as if Justin Fields was at least going to play in some sort of packages. So Andy Dalton's going to have a bad week 1. Don't be surprised to see Justin Fields out there week 2.
Yeah, definitely going to be a tough matchup. And the Chicago fans, we see a lot of them on Twitter. We know that they're going to be clamoring for Mr. Fields to be playing. So for the quarterbacks, they're not going to have as hard of a job because David Montgomery is easily a good running back for them.
Yeah, he was a 1,000-yard rusher last season, did have 55 receptions, which is really the question mark in his game. But with the Tariq Cohen injury, he was able to get a little bit more receiving work. So I'm really high on David Montgomery to have a good season and kind of step up, kind of like Antonio Gibson this upcoming season.
Yeah, especially with a young quarterback and quarterback that they have. They do sign Damian Williams, who opted out for 2020 from the Chiefs.
Everyone remembers playoff Damian from a couple years back.
Yeah, with decent numbers, and was he an opt-out from like the whole season, or did he only opt out?
He was like one of the first guys that opted out of
the whole season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you said because you have 11 games. Those are from his previous
2019 numbers.
Yeah, no worries. And then Tariq Cohen placed on IR. Poor dude just hasn't been able to be what he was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, he's still recovering from the ACL injury he suffered last season. With being placed on IR, he's missing at least the first 6 games this year. It seems like he's been slowly coming back from that injury. Yeah, he had 70-plus receptions in 2018 and 2019, so that just opens the door for David Montgomery to get some more receiving work and really be a 3-down guy for this team.
Yeah, and then receiving core, which I still think is kind of lacking. Allen Robinson.
Yeah, but besides their wide receiver 1, there's not much behind him.
Allen Robinson had a great season last year with over 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, over 100 receptions. Those are wide receiver 1 numbers. Those are great numbers. But behind him, Darnell Mooney, Marquise Goodwin, and Demarie Byrd.
Demarie Byrd. They do sign Brashad Perriman, who was released by the Lions.
Someone cut by the Lions?
Yeah, so definitely not a promising receiving core behind Robinson. Besides Mooney, who was a 5th-round pick in the 2020 draft, did have over 600 yards receiving last season.
Yeah.
And really could add a lot more, but just with Mitch Trubisky's QB play, he missed him on a number of deep throws, so the numbers could have been inflated.
Also lose Anthony Miller, too. So Robinson is even more of a wide receiver 1 now. And then a guy who I think is kind of flown under the radar is Cole Kmet at tight end.
Yeah, they still have Jimmy Graham, who is still playing in the league. He's 34 years old and had 8 touchdowns last season, so definitely look for him to be a red zone threat again. But Cole Kmet, just as playing as the tight end too last season, just 28 receptions, but just Jimmy Graham another year older and in the league, just durability is going to be a concern with him. So Cole Kmet, if Jimmy Graham goes down, could have a nice productive season from tight end, and because they don't have very many wide receiver options.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they really are helping for Cole Kmet to step up, especially in his sophomore season, which I think he'll kind of become that. I think he'll take the next step. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, 243 yards receiving last season. You can't
You can only go up from there. Exactly.
I was gonna say you can't go much farther down.
Yeah.
But one thing that is concerning is they're projected the 5th worst offensive line for this upcoming season. Losing, we mentioned earlier, Charles Leno, and losing Bobby Massey. And then their 2nd-round pick, Tevin Jenkins, who they expected to be a starter this upcoming season. He's had back surgery, so he's already on IR. Expected to miss the first 6 games, but expected out even longer. So going to miss him at least the first half of the season.
Yeah. I mean, they still have Jason Peters, but definitely a guy up there with age.
I was going to say Jason Peters got to be like 36,
yeah,
37
Cody Whitehair
now.
is and then German Affetti, who's literally, I feel like, has been passed around again, one of those other guys. So they have a few names, but an offensive line that we both think is going to be not very good, especially when they try to fix it with their draft pick and Tevin Jenkins, who's going to be out. And then kind of let's go to the defensive side of the ball. For a while, Chicago's been known for their defense for the past few years, but this defense isn't the same as it once was. They're not as good as they were. Still have some names.
I still consider them at least average to slightly above average.
I would say slightly above average. They still have some good names: Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith. Tayshaun Gibson and Eddie Jackson. Those are the guys who are going to be getting you most of your production.
Yeah, so definitely still should have some decent defensive production. In terms of fantasy production, Andy Dalton, don't touch him because Justin Fields should be the starting quarterback for the majority of the season. Yeah. I think you should draft him late in your fantasy drafts just to stash him for later on. When he's starting, just because of the threat with his legs also, he could have some top 12 potential. David Montgomery being drafted as a running back 18, mid to late third round. He was the running back 4 last season, Stein, which is kind of hard to believe. Remember, he had such a great second half of the season, the game and the run.
The game, yeah, exactly. I kind of like him as a running back too. I mean, I don't think he's one. I don't think he's as flashy as a 1, but definitely a guy that can get you some points at 2. Allen Robinson, though, I really like as a wide receiver 11.
Yeah, getting drafted right in that same range as Terry McLaurin, who we talked about earlier in that middle of the third round. He was the wide receiver 9 last season, wide receiver 8 the season before that, so he's putting up some wide receiver 1 type numbers. I expect him to be in that same spot again.
Darnell Mooney, just kind of a bench. And then Cole Kmet and Jimmy Graham, I pencil those in. Like Jimmy Graham, you might need like a veteran, tight end to stream, and then Cole Kmet, I really think is going to take a step up. So
kind of like some of those other tight ends, Evan Ingram, Zach Ertz, where he's getting drafted as a tight end too. If you want to back up tight end,
I wouldn't draft Cole Kmet, but I would pick him up or see, just kind of like watch him as the season goes on, because I think he is going to emerge. And then the Bears defense, we both think is above average, so I think that'd be worthy of taking them in a drafted late, as most defenses are.
Definitely.
And then, okay, so that was the Bears. Let's move on to the Lions, who who don't have a lot going for them, and we'll say that very nicely.
They do have a coaching change. They've got a lot of changes.
Yes, Matt Patricia out. The pencil is gone, replaced by crazy Dan Campbell.
Oh man, I just with following the NFL, you probably heard some of the crazy stories about Dan Campbell this offseason. And really the only reason the Lions are probably making any sort of headlines is because of Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
So we'll see how he does in his first head
good on
coaching
him
tenure.
for at least having people talk about him, for being, a guy who's...
Of course, most of the talk isn't about the actual team that he has, more about some of the antics and stuff that he's done.
Yes, exactly. Which is nice from Patricia, because Patricia was... A lot of people did not like Patricia. The experiment failed. They were trying to be the Patriots of the NFC, and
one of the Belichick prodigies.
Belichick disciples. They tried to have the tight end and do everything like the Patriots were doing, but just wasn't working. And Dan Campbell's going to inherit an interesting quarterback situation as the stalwart quarterback Matt Stafford. We saw went to the went to the Rams, and the Rams give Jared Goff to the Lions. So a big shakeup with quarterbacks.
Yeah, so that's what Jared Goff, remember he was the guy that led the Rams to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They end up getting him, a couple of first-round picks, giving away Matt Stafford, who had been the starter there for the past 12 seasons. Goff had decent numbers last year, 20 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He was almost a 4,000-yard passer. But he doesn't have a whole lot of pieces around him, especially compared to what he had in that Rams offense, which is probably why he was so successful.
Yeah, this is really a tough move for Jared Goff, because you're going from a city and a team that is trending in a positive direction.
You talk about like the Sean McVay, the guys that he's got around him.
Yeah,
Cam Akers when he's healthy.
The new stadium, the new uniforms, flashy. It's LA. It's sunny. It doesn't look every day. The sky doesn't look like it's gray. Where you go to Detroit, where you have a crazy head coach, and then everything else is just going down. So I really like Goff, and I hope he's able to succeed. He's pretty average, but still a decent amount of passing yards, I think. Mm-hmm. He's just not going to have a lot of talent around him, especially to catch passes, as we'll talk about the receiving core. What is going to, I guess, probably be their main offensive attack is going to be their running game, and that's going to be mostly DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, Swift in his rookie season last year did 8 touchdowns on the ground, had some decent receiving numbers. No more Adrian Peterson, no more Kerryon Johnson. So he's got at least some more touches coming his way.
Yeah,
like
they add Jamal Williams too, back up from the Packers.
Yeah, and then they draft Jamar Johnson, so that's going to be their running back core. Swift is battling a core/groin injury. He's missed the preseason and most of camp. He's questionable for week 1. The reports I've seen from like yesterday and today have said that he's most likely going to be out there week 1. But of course, not being at 100%, you always wonder whether or not he's going to have a full workload.
Yeah.
And then their receiving core is just absolutely brand new. No more Kenny Golladay, no more Marvin Jones Jr., no more Danny Amendola. You replace that with Tyrell Williams, Quintez Cephas, Khalif Raymond, and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Out of Notre Dame. So, oh gosh, it's a very, very interesting, USC for St. Brown.
You're thinking I think
Equiminius St. Brown. Too many St. Browns. Notre Dame or USC was a good guess for those guys. But literally a completely new receiving core and not a good receiving core at that.
Yeah, Tyrell Williams is your wide receiver 1. He missed all of 2020 due to injury. Was a 600-yard receiver back with the Raiders in 2019, but definitely not a wide receiver 1. Khalif Raymond has 19 career receptions in 4 seasons, mainly with the Titans. Quintez Cephas was a rookie last season, only had 20 receptions, and then you've got a rookie who hasn't played yet. So, like I said, Jared Goff is going to have a huge culture shock in terms of throwing to Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee throwing to a bunch of nobodies,
exactly.
to put it harshly.
Yeah, this is really, they are very anemic at receiver right now, and it's gonna be an uphill battle for Jared Goff to be successful there.
Probably one of their biggest guys in terms of could be leading the team in receptions this year is TJ Hawkinson, who really stepped up last season. 67 receptions, over 700 yards. 6 touchdowns. He pretty much doubled his stats from his rookie season. So, like I said, just with no one else really around him, he should be able to eat up targets, eat up receptions. They're going to be trailing in ball games, so they're going to be throwing the football. Jared Goff was never really known as a deep throwing guy, gunslinger. So definitely could be just peppering Hawkinson out in the flats with targets. So I think Hawkinson should have a big season.
Yeah, definitely. And then offensive line, just really nothing to write home about.
They're actually projected the 10th best offensive line. They've got Taylor Decker, who's a stud at left tackle. They draft Penei Sewell, who no one thought he was going to be available, 7th overall when they picked. But with all the offensive weapons being picked, Sewell drops to them. He'll end up being their starting right tackle. So
I was going to point out that Penei Sewell is going to be a stud.
Yeah, the head and shoulders best offensive lineman in that draft. Like I said, dropping to 7th overall with them. The offensive line could be the shining spot of this offense for them.
Yeah. I said nothing to write home about that just because the Lions are just kind of on really overall. But this offensive line, especially with Sewell, could be building for the future, and that's I think what they'll be doing is kind of gearing it up to have a new quarterback in a few years and all new receiving core and just be ready to actually compete. Defensive side of the ball,
it's bad.
Yeah,
the most yards per game and points per game allowed last season. They'll be one of the worst defenses overall in the league once again, and it's going to be bad like a lot of teams that we've talked about.
Yeah, people are hoping that Jeff Okudah can take that next step, but just a very bad rookie season last year.
And notably, they didn't have a kicker for a day on this team, so when everyone was making the roster cuts to make their 53-man roster, they end up releasing Randy Bullock and Zane Gonzalez, so they had no kickers for a day, and then they ended up claiming Austin Seibert from the Bengals the following day, but just kind of something that was pretty funny, and just one of those other Dan Campbell kind of antics.
Yeah, and they still have a couple Pats carryovers like Jamie Collins and Trey Flowers, which is kind of funny because when they were trying to be the Patriots. And I mean, it's going to be a bad defense and just a bad year for the Lions overall.
Yeah, and then fantasy outlook, it's going to be pretty quick. Jared Goff, stream him at best, but I would pretty much avoid Goff. DeAndre Swift being drafted as the running back 16, so mid-third ADP. He was the running back 18 last season. He's another guy kind of like Miles Sanders, where I don't like him in that mid third round spot. I'd rather have a guy like David Montgomery. So
Yeah.
but because there's not many other options, if Swift is healthy and out there, then he's gonna get touches.
Yeah. Jamal Williams, round 11 ADP. He'd probably get the third down, kind of work if Swift's out.
Yeah, you saw him have a little bit of value even in that Green Bay offense last season with Aaron Jones playing, so I think he could have some standalone value, and then definitely if Swift ever misses a game, then he's going to get the 3-down work and be very valuable.
Now, an interesting case, because this is a bad team, but that Tyrell Williams or Amon-Ra St. Brown could either one be the wide receiver one on a bad team, which is not the worst thing to be in the world.
Like I was saying with Hawkinson going to get a lot of targets, I mean, someone's got to be the wide receiver one.
Someone's got to get targets.
You got to throw the ball to someone.
Yeah.
So Tyrell Williams, St. Brown, both of them are worth some speculative ads late in drafts in the later rounds, and then TJ Hawkinson being drafted as the tight end 6, really the last of the decent tight ends.
I would agree with
on
that.
the board. He was the tight end 5 last season, so I've been saying to just expect some large volume shares for him.
Yeah. All right, moving on to from the starving to the full is going to be the Packers. You see what I did there because the Dan Campbell eating people's kneecaps, but the Packers 13-3 last season, lose in the NFC Championship game and a very bad played.
Man, we've heard that before.
Yeah, and a very badly played game with their offense, couldn't capitalize on so many turnovers. And that's going to start with Aaron Rodgers, who literally the entire offseason's been about the drama.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was pretty much the talk of the offseason besides Deshaun Watson. They had this huge feud. They're fine for now, at least for this upcoming season. They end up restructuring Rodgers' contract. They void 2023 off of his deal. They have a handshake agreement to trade Rodgers if he wants to be traded after this upcoming season. So things are still kind of on some shaky terms, but they at least have their stud quarterback for this upcoming season.
Yeah, the good news for Packers fans is that Aaron Rodgers will be playing this season. You can't guarantee the next season, and can't guarantee any kind of long-term future with him, but at least you'll have him this season, and you guys are set up to be really successful this season as well. With kind of the way the team's been structured. I mean, MVP last season, just great numbers all around. 48 touchdowns, 5 picks for an 84 QBR. Just ridiculous again, just Aaron Rodgers-like numbers.
I was going to say, I mean, you understand why it was the MVP when he led the league in completion percentage, touchdown passes, QBR, touchdown percentage, interception percentage. When you're leading in all those kind of stats as a quarterback, that's a pretty good indicator of why you're the MVP award winner.
Yeah.
So expect some great production once again from Aaron Rodgers because he's got a lot of his pieces back, including them re-signing Aaron Jones this offseason.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't think they were going to, but they do re-sign Aaron Jones, who last year had a great rushing season with 201 carries for over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. Great running back numbers and decent pass catching numbers too.
Yeah, that's what they lose Jamal Williams, so expect some more work for Aaron Jones, even though A.J. Dillon should have a little bit of work in there as well as the running back too. But Aaron Jones is definitely going to be pretty much the bell cow of this running attack.
Yeah, receiving-wise, Davante Adams has just been a darling.
Yeah, I mean, 1,300 yards receiving, 18 touchdowns, led the league in receiving touchdowns and receiving yards per game, almost 100 yards per game last season. He's Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy. When stuff in the offseason was going on saying that Rodgers might not come back, Davante Adams was a little cryptic in not knowing his future overall with the team as he's got a contract year coming up soon as well. Behind Davante Adams, they've got Randall Cobb back, as that was kind of one of the things that Rodgers wanted back was his man Randall Cobb, who had some great seasons with him.
Yeah, I mean, not going to be anywhere near Adams' production, but at least Rodgers will have his buddy and Randall Cobb back. You'd think they'd bring back the whole gang, get Jordy Nelson and some of those old tight ends.
Apparently they tried to get Jordy Nelson back, but he is happy in retirement.
They do draft Amari Rodgers as well, so
he's
going to be contributing.
I was going to say, kind of buried on this depth chart, though, is you got Marquez Valdez-Scantling as your deep threat. Alan Lazard is another nice young piece. So definitely a plethora of receiving options for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and Robert Tonyan, who had a really good kind of a breakout season last year for a tight end.
52 receptions, 11 of those 52 were touchdowns. So just crazy production in the red zone. Expect those 11 touchdowns to come down to earth a little bit. But still, yes, a great season last year for Robert Tonyan, just kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah. Offensive line taking a big fall as they're projected to be the 16th best, so right in the middle from the second best from last year.
Yeah, and that's really because they lost some pieces on the offensive line. Their center, Corey Linsley, leaves in free agency. They lose their right tackle and Rick Wagner as well. And then David Bakhtiari is starting out the season on the PUP list as he's recovering from his torn ACL in December, so he's going to miss at least the first third of the season. So Rodgers may lose a little bit of that protection that he's had in years past.
Yeah, David Bakhtiari is definitely their best, kind of the leader of that offensive line, and the fact he's going to be starting on the PUP list isn't a great sign, but this offensive line should come into its own and should be, decent. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I would say a pretty average to slightly above average.
Yeah.
Linebacker Zadarius Smith is good, but he could potentially miss week 1 with a back injury.
Yeah, that'd be a big loss for them week 1 because he's probably one of the better names on this defense.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny Clark at nose tackle has been good. Jairi Alexander, great cornerback. And Kevin King, also pretty good cornerback. So you have some good. Adrian Amos played well last year. And Falcons fans remember Devondre Campbell is going to be starting on that.
Really?
Yeah, interior linebacker.
Did not know that he was with the Packers, but yeah, it should be an average, slightly above average defense for the Packers.
This offense is going to be the name of the game for the Packers.
Yeah, and speaking of the offense, we'll take a look at the fantasy outlook. Aaron Rodgers being drafted as the QB 8, so end of the 4th round, early 5th round.
Yeah.
In that MVP season, he was still just a QB 3 fantasy wise.
Dynasty wise, might not be the best to touch him right now. I mean, I don't know. There probably could be better options,
Yeah,
but in a regular redraft league, he's definitely a good guy to take for your quarterback.
Like you said, dynasty wise, you just don't know what the future with him past this season. So but yeah, definitely worth a quarterback spot in your redraft leagues.
Aaron Jones, I think, could regress a little bit this year. Kind of a running back 9, kind of picked up at that come back around.
Split.
Yeah. Running back 5 last season and running back 2 in 2019. So kind of seeing a little bit of a regression with Aaron Jones.
Yeah, you've seen some elite production over the past 2 seasons fantasy-wise. So expect him to still be a running back 1, but being drafted in the back end of the 1st round.
Yeah, A.J. Dillon available, picked up around the 9th as a guy you can keep on your bench. Definitely a guy that you'd want to stash. At least I would, because he's kind of the future of that running back position in Green Bay.
And you saw that Jamal Williams had a decent standalone value with Green Bay last year, so maybe A.J. Dillon, even though he's more of a not as good as a receiving back, could maybe carve out a little bit of a role also.
Devontae Adams definitely picked up within the first 5 picks. He's been top 5 easy. Definitely, people have him as wide receiver 2.
It's between him and Tyreek as wide receiver 1, probably personal preference for you.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyreek Hill's got the long touchdowns and everything. He's going to rack up receiving yards and touchdowns. Devontae Adams, definitely for PPR, is going to get 8 to 10 receptions a ball game. So it's really personal preference which one you want as your first wide receiver off the board.
Yeah. And then those other receivers that they have, I'd stay away from Cobb, but maybe MVS or Lazard could be available if Adams gets hurt, or if it's just a bad week matchup, for Adams or something like that.
Yeah, and they definitely have value if Devontae Adams gets hurt.
Adams can't catch all the balls, can he?
Yeah. Hey, he'll try to.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers will keep throwing it to him.
Yeah.
So.
And Robert Tonyan drafted as the tight end 11, which I think definitely could be a steal.
Yeah, he was the tight end 3 last season because of all those touchdowns. Everyone's predicting some touchdown regression. Just with that having his breakout season last year, you really don't know, kind of like Logan Thomas, what to expect from him this upcoming season. So definitely one of the back end tight ends drafted. Don't really know what to expect from him.
And the defense is not bad enough to say not to take a look at, but not good enough to say draft them. So they'd just be, stream option or maybe back half draft for your defense.
Yeah, and then looking at the final team in this episode will be the Minnesota Vikings, middle of the pack, 7-9 team last season. Pretty much bringing back the gang on offense. When you talk about Kirk Cousins at the helm, Dalvin Cook running back, and then your top two receivers being Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Yeah,
pretty much the exact same offense. Nothing really super exciting. I guess the biggest thing is adding Kellen Mond. As to potentially to light a fire under Cousins' butt.
Yeah, starting to prepare more for the future. Kirk Cousins had a great season stat-wise last year. 35 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. He was a 4,000-yard passer, but starting to prepare a little bit for the future. I think he's only signed through the end of next season. I think through the end of next season. I'm not 100% sure on that, but running back, of course, you've got the elite Dalvin Cook. 1,500-yard rusher, 16 touchdowns on the ground, and then a great receiver.
Justin Jefferson, great rookie season, emerged as the wide receiver one. Adam Thielen, still contributing. Do have some other receiving options in KJ Osborne and Chad Beebe.
BB
Westbrook even too.
I would say BB will start out the season on IR. They did draft a rookie in the 5th round, Amir Smith-Marset. He could be the starting wide receiver 3 for them, but it's going to be Thielen and Jefferson eating up the majority of the targets from Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. Tight end. Now that's going to be a weakness for this offense as Kyle Rudolph gone and Irv Smith Jr. out for the season with a meniscus tear. So that's leaving them scrambling, and they traded for Chris Herndon from the Jets, who wasn't terrible but wasn't amazing.
He had a promising rookie year back in 2018, but hasn't been able to replicate those numbers. Just 31 receptions, less than 300 yards last season for the lowly Jets, but they just needed him to fill a hole at tight end because the only other guy that they've got is Tyler Conklin as an in-house starting
he'll probably
option.
Be there. He'll probably be the number one, and they'll kind of be 1 and 2.
Yeah, Herndon is still kind of learning the offense, so expect him to be kind of eased into work, but neither one is really going to have too much production.
Yeah, and then for the offensive line, not a very good offensive line last year. They did draft Christian Darrisaw in the 1st round to help play that left tackle. And returning right tackle Brian O'Neill
is probably the best guy that they got coming back, but they're projected 6th worst this upcoming season, so don't expect too much from them.
Yeah, no, nothing really too great. Defensive side of the ball, the biggest ad, might be one of the biggest ads in the league, is Patrick Peterson. Even though he is a little bit up there in age, going to be taking over at cornerback. So he's going to help lead a defense that I would say is average to above average.
Mm-hmm.
You could maybe make the case that they're not as good as they say, but Danielle Hunter is pretty good up front. Davlin Tomlinson, hopefully he can emerge. Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr have both been kind of stalwarts at linebacker. And then Harrison Smith.
Yeah, he earned himself a contract last week, 4 years, $64 million deal. So, yeah, I'd say they're about a middle-of-the-pack defense and could have some very productive weeks and then some weeks where they kind of disappear.
Yeah. Fantasy outlook, Kirk Cousins, pretty much a streamer to back half quarterback.
Yeah, he was the QB 11 last season, so in a 12-team league, maybe look at him as like the last quarterback, starting quarterback off the board, but definitely going to be a streaming option for you this season. Just it doesn't seem like a guy that puts up great numbers, but just because of who he's got around him, he's going to be okay as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think he has plenty of options. Dalvin, I know you're in love with Dalvin, and Dalvin has been picked up running back 2. He's the running back 2 last season, so perfect spot for him.
Yeah, he's going
top 3 pick.
Right behind CMC. In most cases, he's going to be in front of Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, unless you got a Saints fan.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless you have a Titans or Saints or somebody really likes a guy like Derrick Henry in front, which might be me. I might be thinking that Dalvin isn't as good as Hunter. I keep saying Hunter Henry as Derrick Henry.
I don't know why you got Hunter Henry on the mind.
Well, he's on my team, that's why. Alexander Madison is decent backup.
Yeah, he's a quality handcuff. If Dalvin goes down, then he's definitely going to... He saw a couple starts last season. One, he was really bad. In the week 17, he was pretty good in. So, quality handcuff if you want to grab him in case Cook gets injured.
Yeah. Justin Jefferson, definitely a guy that I think will have a great season. Drafted as the wide receiver 8. Gonna pick him up around that second to third round turnaround. Wide receiver 6 last season for a rookie. That is great numbers.
Yep.
Expect him to be the same, if not better. Adam Thielen, another guy who's consistently, good. Drafted wide receiver 19, so on that third, 4 come back around.
Yeah, pretty much the next round.
Yeah, wide receiver 10 last season for a team that had a wide receiver 6 last season. That's pretty good.
Yeah, wide receiver 6 and a wide receiver 10. Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, both great options for your fantasy teams.
Yeah, and then that Vikings defense to finish it up is going to be a streaming option. Definitely nothing to write home about. So, guys, that's going to get it for our... Yeah, take a deep breath.
Yeah, big old marathon of an episode, but thank you guys. If you made it this far, and thank you guys each and every time for tuning in. We'll have our NFC South and our NFC West prediction show next. It'll come out the following day, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Follow us on Instagram at the Couch Quarterbacks for all of our up-to-date info on when we're going to be posting episodes. For Andrew Rochefort, it's Ben Steinberg. We will see you guys on the flip side.
See you guys.